Welcome everyone. Thank you everyone for joining for the Health for the World webinar. My name is Bhavya Rihani. I'm the president and co-founder of Health for the World and a neuroradiologist. For those people who do not know Health for the World is a 501c3 nonprofit which is promoting health equity globally using medical education, free of cost technology solutions, and humanitarian aid in 122 countries. The organization is built on principle of seva or selfless service. We are really honored to have really amazing speakers today, radiology leaders, and it's my honor to welcome them today. We have Dr. Orlando Otis here, who is the professor of radiology and chair of radiology at Jacobi Medical Center. He has mentored numerous radiologists globally. He was recently awarded the ASSR Gold Medal in 2022 and has received numerous accolades. So we are honored to have you. We have Dr. Erin Kilk here. She's the Associate Professor of Clinical Radiology and Radiological Sciences and a Program Director of Diagnostic Radiology Residency at Vanderbilt. She's also the Director of Arts at Department of Radiology and chairs the American College of Radiology Art Subcommittee. Before this, she was a Program Director at Virginia Mason. Welcome, Dr. Cook. We have Dr. Shweta Bhatt here. Dr. Bhatt is the Diagnostic Radiology Residency Program Director and Professor of Radiology at Mayo Clinic, Florida. She's a much sought out speaker nationally and internationally for body imaging and ultrasound and MRI. Welcome, Dr. Bhatt. We have Dr. Joshua Icon here, who's an assistant professor in radiology and nuclear medicine at University of Arkansas. He's associate program director, diagnostic radiology at University of Arkansas, and also the former cancer imaging fellow at Dana-Farber Cancer Care Center. Welcome. Next, we have Dr. Omar Owan, who is a professor of diagnostic radiology and nuclear medicine at University of Maryland, and also the associate vice chair of education and associate program director of diagnostic radiology residency at University of Maryland. Dr. Owan remains a strong advocate for medical education. He's also administrator for the department-wide teaching file and is the faculty advisor for radiology global health elective offered to the radiology residents. Welcome, Dr. Owan. Next, we have Dr. Mehen Mathur, who is the Associate Professor of Radiology and Biomedical Imaging and Vice Chair for Education and Associate Program Director for Radiology and Biomedical Imaging at Yale New Haven Hospital. He was recently awarded the Diagnostic Radiology Residency Graduate Class Teaching Award at Yale Department of Radiology. Welcome, Dr. Mathur. Here are our panelists, and we also have wonderful moderators today. And let me start with Shiva Singh. Dr. Shiva Singh is a part of our virtual education team at Health for the World, who has organized this panel and has done a great job. He's a postdoctoral research fellow at National Institute of Health and is also applying for radiology residency this year, like many of you here today. Then we have Abhinav, who is also a part of our virtual education team at Health for the World. He is doing his internship at Weiss Memorial Hospital in Chicago, and he's currently applying for radiology residency, like many of you here. Then we have Adike joining from Nigeria. Adike is doing radiology residency in Nigeria, also part of our virtual education team and applying for radiology residency in the near future. Then we have Clara Kerwin, who is a part of our virtual education team at Health for the World. Will be starting radiology residency at Boston University next year and is currently doing Masters of Public Health at Harvard Medical School and Harvard School of Public Health. So welcome, Clara. Welcome everyone for joining today. I wish you all of you luck in your journey in pursuing radiology as a career. It's an amazing specialty. As a neuroradiologist, I have enjoyed it in the last decade, and I wish you all luck. For your friends and colleagues who have not been able to join, this session will be recorded and uploaded at Health for the World YouTube channel. It is called the Health for the World Academy YouTube channel, and they can look at the recording there in the future if they end up missing the session. It's right here, and so they can just subscribe and listen to the recording later. Um, all right, so with that, I turn the table to Dr. Shiva Singh, who will be coordinating the session.
Thank you, Dr. Rehani, for introducing the speakers and the moderators. Before the questions and answers start, I would like to welcome the attendees and inform them that the session is going to be of 1 hour and 15 minutes. Attendees can put their questions in the question and answer box, and we'll be going systematically starting from the pre-application period to the ERAS CV, and then the letter of recommendations, the signaling, and then moving forward to the interview season and ranking. So now I hand over to Clara for getting ahead with the questions.
Thanks, Shiva. So I'll get us started with just a couple broad questions to get our panelists going. And then, as Shiva mentioned, please put any questions you might have in the Q&A function, and we'll get to those afterwards. So to get us started, our first question for our panelists is, from your perspective, what makes an applicant competitive for the field of radiology and for your program specifically?
Well,
I'll take a stab at that. First of all, I think what makes myself and the selection committee notice an applicant is the integrity, the validity, and of their whole application packet and their portfolio. I think applicants should be aware that radiologists really pay attention to details. We notice every little thing, and preparation is key. Everything counts, everything matters. You're trying to get a job, it's like applying for a job interview. You know, you got to bring your A game, you got to have everything lined up, and your application packet should make sense. It should be consistent. The letters of recommendation should complement the personal statement, the academic portfolio as highlighted by a well-written and entered CV history. There should be consistency throughout. It should make sense. So in a nutshell, I think that preparation is key, that chance favors the prepared mind, and that would be my general comment on this. And certainly I'll leave the table open for our other members to comment.
Yeah, I mean, I think just to piggyback what Dr. Ortiz said, it's never just one thing, right? It's really a holistic review, exactly what Dr. Ortiz said, and it's all the pieces of the puzzle that kind of come together to inform the person or us that's reviewing the applications about what a person is, what a person is all about. So it all comes, it's not just, oh, you got a 270 on your boards. That's not enough, you know, honestly, quite frankly. In fact, a lot of people are getting 250s and 260s. It really comes down to everything that you show. And, you know, really, you know, for me, a lot of it actually comes down to like what people are saying about you, the letters of recommendation. Like, I think these are people, this often doesn't get talked about enough. Like, I want to see, like, you know, how compassionate is this person? Like, how much emotional intelligence does this person have? How hardworking is this person? How much of a team player is this person? And these are the things that kind of come to light and that are really like, oh, wow, okay, let's offer this person an interview. I think those things really say a lot because, you know, ultimately, a lot of people will have great scores. A lot of people will do well in medical school. A lot of people will have X amount of publications. But, you know, when we start to see these things, these humanistic aspects of a person come to light, that's what gets, I think, all of us on this panel excited.
I mean, I couldn't agree more. You know, it's an incredibly difficult task looking at all these applications. I think all of us will agree with that. We get over 1,000 applications to screen them. Everybody, as Dr. Alwan is saying, have incredible scores. You're incredible applicants. You know, we look at all aspects of your application: the volunteering, the research, how you did academically, the letters. We look at your personal statement. How passionate are you about radiology? And I think, you know, for any applicant that feels that they may be deficient in one of those categories and are perhaps feeling insecure about it, I'd also say, play to your strengths. I'll give my own example. I'm not a big researcher, and I don't think in my lifetime I will become a very big researcher. So I know that I need to do a little bit in order to sort of stay up to date with the field of within my field of radiology. But I'm passionate about education. I'm passionate about mentoring, and I make sure that whatever I choose to do sort of highlights those aspects of my career. And so if you're able to do that in your application, if you're somebody who loves to do volunteer work, you love to do work overseas, and you may not necessarily, even if you don't see that connection immediately to radiology, highlight it and think about it a little bit more as you're applying. And eventually you'll see that many of the things you're passionate about, you can draw those connections to radiology. And we as people who screen your applications will see that and will appreciate that.
I totally agree with all of that has been said. Sorry, Erin, I know you were going to speak.
Go for it.
I'll keep it short, but a couple of things I do want to emphasize. Scores is not everything, as has already been said. Some people think, oh, I got a 270, nothing else matters. No, that's not true. We keep a cutoff, to filter out the applications because, as Mahan said, we receive like 1,000+ applications. But score itself is not everything. If you have met the cutoff, usually in our program we don't really go into the details of, oh, this person has 252 and this person has 248, so 252 is better than 248. No, it doesn't work that way. And in the stories, as Mahan said again, be honest. We do appreciate honesty. Some people don't do well in their tests and something has happened. Put your life story out there. It's totally acceptable to put it out there because that's the only way we will come to know. So instead of making up stuff that, oh, I'm a great researcher, I want to do this and I want to do this science and this, when you're not interested in it doesn't help, because we can tell. We can tell. So I think honesty goes a long way too.
Yeah, I completely agree. The key thing is to really show us who you are. And yeah, when we talk about numbers and that sort of thing, obviously there is some importance just in the fact that radiology is a complex field and you have to be able to learn a large volume of information. So we want to make sure that the people that we're bringing into the program are going to be able to succeed. So it's just in looking at it in that sort of way. But that being said, there's a large range there of what people can be really successful with. So a lot more is taken into account. All those other things in your application are also very important. And it's not just like that there's one thing, like if I see somebody has a lot of publications that like that's an automatic in or that sort of thing. And it really is looking at the whole package. If there are things that you think that are really important in your life that maybe aren't totally clear in your application, that's a great type of thing to include in your personal statement. And also it's really helpful when you're addressing things in your personal statement to actually make it clear, some indication of why you want to do radiology, because sometimes that's not totally clear by the application. So that can be really helpful as well to us when we're going through these, because we try to figure out the whole why of why you want to be doing this. It's a huge step.
Thank you all so much for your insightful answers. Another question that I think is on many of our applicants' minds has to do with the novelty of signaling. So we're wondering what your recommendations are regarding signaling and geographic preferences. And particularly some applicants were wondering if candidates would ever be filtered out if they don't specify any specific geographic preference. I can go first. Signaling helps us if there are, similar applications, and then we have to decide, okay, out of these 10 applications, which one should be ranked higher or should go higher on the list. But signaling does not automatically gets you invited for an interview. So we do not look at the signals in the beginning when we are reviewing the applications. I know signaling has gotten a little more
elaborate this year with some 6 gold and 6 silver. So that'll give you a little more flexibility, I believe, with 12 signals. The regional signaling, the preferences does help us too, because, you know, if I'm in Florida and if somebody is applying from Seattle, I need to know, you know, if you're really interested in coming here or not, and if there's a reason for that. So that way, you know, those regional preferences definitely helped us decide whether, you know, this person could potentially be a resident at our program or not.
I think you should really see signaling as an opportunity to convey your interest in a program. It's as simple as that. I think it should just be perceived as a gift to an applicant, you know, hey, like I'm interested in the program, especially if you're not geographic. Like if you're here in Baltimore or you're in New Haven and Yale and you want to go to California, like definitely you should be signaling those California programs, because, you know, sometimes it can be very tough to get into those programs when you're not a local, you know, applicant. And the other thing is that, you know, you should use them. I mean, you have 6 gold, 6 silver. No PD is gonna be like, oh, you know, I'm a silver and not a gold. I'm definitely not gonna, you know, interview them. I mean, like we're human beings too. You know what I mean? Like we understand that there's 6 and 6. Like no PD is going to do that. So I would just use them. Don't worry about them. It also helps us, as, you know, Dr. Butt said, you know, kind of filter out, you know, who is serious and who's not. But, you know, at the end of the day, if we like someone and they didn't signal us, we're still going to interview them, you know, because we like them, you know. So it's not an all or none type of phenomenon, but it should be perceived, I think, as a way that will help you sort of stratify and help you show and express your interest into a program.
I agree with what was previously said. I think, you know, signaling works for insects, animals, humans at the bar. It can't hurt. I look at signaling as fine tuning and guiding us a little bit, guiding the committee after the interview process. So we look at it as fine tuning. I haven't seen it hurt anybody in the last time with the last match. So, and I think this additional layer will give applicants a little bit more ability to express interest. So I would agree with what's been said by the other panelists.
Yeah, along those lines too, I think the geographic preferences give us one extra level too, to know who's interested. I mean, like it's been said, our group's in Arkansas. If you're coming from New York or California or something like that, I think it gives us a little bit better idea if you've put on there a geographic preference for the Southeast. So I think these are all tools that are supposed to help y'all show places that you're interested in. And so I would certainly use them and not leave them, you know, blank.
You know, it was the first year last year that signaling came up for radiology, and I you know, we weren't really sure how it was going to be used, and what we found, we ended up using it perhaps how Dr. Butt was saying, where applicants were very similar. You know, if one has signaled us, perhaps we would give them a little bit more preference. Now, remember, many of the applications are very similar, right? Very competitive. So use those signals, because it will allow you to perhaps have a leg up on somebody else who is interested in another program or another area of the country. So definitely use them. The other things I'll say is, you know, talk to perhaps your home program about whether or not they should expect to get a signal from you. You know, every program is different. I would say that for Yale, for our own medical students and for anyone who rotates with us, if they met with us, you know, we know them, they don't have to send a signal to us. But every program may be a little bit different. So have that conversation with the program director or any of your research mentors as well. And the last thing I'll say is that, you know, there's always some strategy to this. I get it. I'm the worst at strategy. I always lose when I try to strategize things. And so, you know, just do your best. I think how Dr. Owen was saying, you know, it's an opportunity for you to show love to a program and be genuine about it. And if you do that consistently enough, you're going to end up going at a place that will give you the love back and will match you come match day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, yeah, this Signal is definitely to your advantage to use. And I know, at least I've heard that there's sometimes been some confusion about the geography, the regional preferences, whether that is to somebody's advantage or not. Especially if you're somebody like myself back in the day, I was kind of willing to go anywhere. I just was very flexible about moving. And so I think for some people, it's a little hard where they feel like they don't know how to commit that way. And certainly you could abstain from putting down any type of preference on the geography aspect. But it's not going to hurt you to use everything you have there to still put down a few regions, because it's not like I can see that somebody is interested in the West Coast, but didn't signal my area for the geography aspect of things. So we're not going to know. So it really is to your benefit to use all these tools.
Perfect. Thank you all so much. And then I'll ask one more final question. So there are some of us who are still gathering letters of recommendation, or for those who are applying next year, do you have any recommendations regarding how many letters of recommendation applicants should have, how many radiologists they might try and have as writers, and what makes a strong letter?
I can start with that. I mean, I think that I may be presuming, but most of us on the panelists would probably say that, ask letter writers who know you very well. There is occasionally there are people who just seek out letter writers who are perhaps well known in the field, and they'll sometimes they write a letter, but it may not be, they don't know you as well, so they may not be able to speak to your unique strengths. So hopefully during the process you've encountered people, mentors who really know you very well and can really speak very uniquely about the strengths and what you bring to a program, perhaps even outside of what we can find in your CV. And so seek out those letter writers. From my own perspective, having one from radiology helps, just because, many radiologists perhaps think alike and, know qualities of applicants that we think will make good radiology trainees. And so I can certainly hope to trust their opinion on an applicant when they write a letter. Beyond that, I personally am just looking for people who know you well and can speak to your strengths. And as was said before, I mean, we look at these letters, and if they mention that this is amongst, the best residents, and if they even give a percentage number, the best, amongst the top 10% of residents or medical students I've worked with, that goes a long way. And even if they, by the way, even if they bold it, and there are maybe small things like that, if it just stands out and pops out at you, that makes a big difference, because we review so many applications. And when things like that are in the letter recommendation, I think that goes a long way into helping that applicant. And the other thing I'll say, and I'll let other people chime in, is come perhaps closer to match time. It also really helps if you can have perhaps one of those letter writers send one email or one phone call. And I say one because you don't want to be emailing 10 different programs the same thing about, listen, this is a great applicant. I know this person very well. I've received many of those sort of phone calls and emails over time, and that sticks with me when somebody takes their time to reach out about a specific applicant.
And I think well said, Dr. Mahan. I think, I would just add, go one step further and say that, if you're not getting a radiology letter, that's a red flag, right? I mean, you're applying to diagnostic radiology, interventional radiology. I mean, we really want to see something from radiology where radiologists talk about you. If I'm only seeing a surgery and internal medicine and a dermatology letter and you're applying to our field, I mean, that I want to be as transparent as possible. Like that's not acceptable, right? When you're applying to a program. So you must have at least one radiology letter, and someone that, and the key is that, and I totally agree with what Mahan said, is it has to, the more personal it is, the better. It's not necessarily about the person, who's writing it. You could have, like, I don't know, President Biden write you a letter or something, but if he's just going to talk about your board scores and, your class rank, that doesn't mean anything, right? But if someone really is going to say things about you, about your personality, about your motivation, your drive, your whole personality comes to life those are the best letters, right? Those are the ones that are really going to stand out, are really going to be memorable, and are going to lead to interviews and or, you know, high rank on the rank order list, right? So that's the key. The more personable it is, the better, and you must have one radiology letter at least.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay. It is something, along with, again, indicating that someplace else, whether it's the personal statement or someplace else, your true interest in radiology. Both of those can really go a long way, one way or the other. Because if there's uncertainty there, which can be indicated by no letters from a radiologist, that can be really hard for us to consider your application fully, just because we have so many other applications to choose from, and we want somebody who's really committed to radiology. So that's very important. I think it's great if you have somebody who knows you so well that maybe they have a story or two that illustrates some of your outstanding characteristics, because those are the things that actually really jump out at me. Yeah, the percentages can help, but also a real personal story, because then it makes me feel like, oh yeah, they actually did work with you, they do know you, and they can speak to your character, and I can trust that assessment. And sometimes that'll come from working on a clinical service, but for some folks who maybe have say lots of research, they sometimes will ask a research mentor, especially if you're submitting like a fourth letter, which often in most programs that's not required, but some places do have that as an option. So just do think about everyone you've worked with, and especially those people who've really worked with you a lot, even if it's in different settings, or maybe they have been a mentor at a clinic where you've been volunteering and can speak to that a lot. So consider all avenues, so it's a very personalized type of experience.
Yeah, I agree. People who know you and you know well can really touch upon your story, your human story. We're really interested in the human story, your human story, and the personal statement and the letters of recommendation are opportunities to really bring that out. In addition to the previous excellent comments that were made, I would say that you should also arm your recommenders. You should give them a copy of your CV and a copy of your personal statement. Help them write a more thorough recommendation, guide them, and make their recommendation consistent with what you're saying. And it really keeps your message consistent. There's strategic resonance between your CV, your personal statement, and your letter of recommendation. Give them a list of your programs and make sure that they're aware of the deadlines. Those are very important. You are responsible for your application process, so make sure those deadlines are met. And again, I would reinforce that a radiology recommendation or two is a pretty darn good idea.
I have noticed in the last couple of years, I mean, a lot of applicants apply to more than one specialty. And sometimes, you know, the letters kind of talk about another specialty. So I think it would be a good idea. It doesn't leave a very good impression. We do understand why somebody is writing a recommendation and saying, oh, this person would be a great neurosurgery resident. And we're like wondering, oh, why is he applying for radiology? But I think it'll be a good idea to remind your letter writers that, hey, I'm going to be applying for both. So if you don't mind changing your letters, you just have to tweak it a little bit. Maybe just change one word from neurosurgery to radiology for two different specialties. But yeah, those tiny little details will make a difference, because, you know, it doesn't leave a very good impression when you're seeing, oh, you know, he's actually interested in neurosurgery. Radiology is probably just by the way, you know.
Great, thanks to all our panelists for your comments. I'll now hand the platform over to Adike and Abhinav to give us some of the questions that have been coming through the chat.
Okay, thank you very much, Clara. So thanks so much, our panelists. So the next question we'll have, although it was a little bit emphasized earlier, but because of the importance, we just want a little bit more light on it, about the step 2 scores, because currently is what it's really one of the key aspects. So the questions is actually what is considered as a competitive step 2 score for radiology application? And will a score of in the 220s be considered a red flag?
I think it really depends on the institution that you're applying at, and again, I want to be transparent. As you heard, some programs have cutoffs, and that's totally fine. When we get thousands of applicants, there's nothing wrong with having a cutoff, but there's other programs that don't, we at University of Maryland, we do not have a cutoff. Like we've accepted people, honestly, with under 220s, and we've had people that have gotten a 275. I mean, that's just a fact that, that University of Maryland. Now, with that said, obviously the step 2 score is very important because that's really the only, and by the way, I hate the step 2 score. I hate step 2. I think standardized tests are a complete joke, but with that said, it's the only standardized metric that we have, right, that can evaluate people across institutions, right? And with the step 1 being pass fail, now many more PDs are looking at this, as an objective metric. And so, obviously the lower that score is, the harder it's going to be for you to get an interview. I mean, that's a fact, right? But with that said, it's not everything. It's definitely not everything. And, if you have a 230 or a 220 and, you've shown excellence in a lot of other categories and a lot of other things in your application, and you're strong, otherwise you have made connections, you've done the other things that you're supposed to be doing, then you will be successful, So, it's not the end of the world if you have a low step 2 score. So it's a holistic review, and some places there's a cutoff, but in a lot of places there's not. So don't lose hope. There's always a way if there's a will.
Just to add to that, I think even some places that have a cutoff, that cutoff might be a soft cutoff. And if you have a place that you're really interested in going, still signal those places, maybe reach out to the coordinator or the program director in an email and just let them know that, hey, I'm really interested in the program, would love to interview with you. We've certainly interviewed people and taken people in the past with scores in the 220s or lower. But as with everybody else, it's difficult when you have 1,000 applications. This is one number that we can look at. But I would say certainly don't let that deter you from trying.
I mean, at our for us, we don't have a cutoff, and I'll say that but when we look at sort of the data after the fact, usually our average step 2 score of people who end up matching at our program is usually about 240s, if that's a number. But that has nothing to do with the fact that we have a cutoff or anything. We have matched people in the 200s, low to, between 200 and 210, and they've done very well, and because they were sort of excellent in other aspect of their life. And so, I think luckily I find that people tend to do better on step 2. I certainly did better on step 2 than I did on step 1. So I think, it tends to be a little bit more clinically relevant than perhaps step 1 was. So I think if you're feeling a little bit insecure about that based on some of the numbers that people are putting out there, then just know that you may have to augment the application in another way that's a focus of your strength. I mean, a lot of people are not good test takers. That's okay. And again, something I think I put in the chat, I personally don't think there's any difference between somebody who scores a 225 and a 245. They will, they're going to be, they're going to be good radiology residents. That doesn't really tell me much. So, if you're feeling like you did a little bit lower than you would have liked, just augment the application, reach out to specific programs. And again, our average is around 240, but that may not be the case for other programs. So apply widely, and you'll find a program that suits you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. So, Dr. Abhinav, please, next question.
So the next question is more focused on international medical graduates. I hope we have a few here. So IMGs often take a non-traditional path. What, in your opinion, can IMGs do to stand out? Research is a common thing that a good number of IMGs do. In terms of research, it's quality, quantity, how much research, how many years. Is there a consensus on that? I think a lot of us would like to know that.
Gosh, I don't know that that there's an exact amount. I think it's the consistency, the dedication, sticking to a project, regardless of its publication or not, being able to discuss it, being able to have your sponsor write on your behalf and showing that you were committed to that project. Besides research, I think that a lot of our international colleagues shortchange themselves. They don't really look at their personal journey. Many of our international colleagues have amazing stories. They're incredible. And what I see people go through to come here and then apply for a radiology residency is mind-boggling. And then they don't talk about it. Like almost they keep it quiet. And this is something that they should discuss in their personal statement because it'll say a lot about them. And it shows me the one important quality I look for in all my applicants: grit, stick-to-itness. And that's really important.
Yeah, well said, Dr. Ortiz. Don't think I could have said it any better. I think the bottom line is that there's no magic number. Like, there's no, oh, I need to get 10 publications or 20 publications and I'm going to be good as an IMG. No, the answer to an IMG is that you need to make yourself visible. You have to make yourself and put yourself and plan yourself in such a way that PDs and programs know who the heck you are. You know what I mean? And this comes from networking. This comes from a whole year, 2 years of getting to know a program, doing observerships, doing a research, internship at an institution, going to these meetings, AUR, RSNA, talking to PDs, networking. You have to do these things. These are the things that you do. And this takes time. This doesn't happen overnight, but putting yourself and positioning yourself in a way where you become visible to that PD. Like Aaron Cook knows who the heck you are because you've done, these projects or something like that, or you've posted on Twitter, you've done things to make yourself visible. This I think is a very important recipe for IMGs, to really succeed. The more that you can do that, the more likely you are to get positive feedback in interviews and to succeed on the match process.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it does take sometimes, multiple cycles, and you have to get some exposure in ways that you might not anticipate from the start, where the research may help, but maybe at some point you get on a committee or you get exposure in some other type of way that people can get to know you. And the whole deal here is that you have to find a way that you can get your foot in the door so that you can share that story, because those stories are really meaningful of all of the hard work and dedication and lengths that you've been going to. It's hard for us to hear that story if there's not some type of inroads that way.
Yeah, I totally agree. And, I pride myself in taking a lot of foreign medical graduates in my program. There's on average 50% are foreign medical graduates. Most of them come through the internal research program, which, kind of gives us an entire year to observe them, to work with them. So that makes it really easy for us. But things like these, platforms like these, I actually have a incoming resident next year who I met in one of these platforms, very similar for a different organization. And, he reached out to me and he's committed and he showed interest to me. So, papers, yes, we understand if you're doing 2 years of research, you will come out with papers. There will be at least 10 papers on your CV. I don't pay too much attention on it, but that's just personal. Yes, we do expect some research to show your motivation, how hard you have worked. And again, the letters of recommendation from your mentors, how committed were you? How passionate were you? About the number of years from graduation, we recently, at least at Mayo Clinic, try not to go more than 5 years since graduation. And that is for obvious reasons. It's further away you go from medical school, your medical knowledge is kind of deteriorating too, and you're getting more focused on research, etc. So, one advice would be do not wait too long, just so you have more papers on your CV, because that may harm you rather than benefit you.
Some excellent comments there. something that Dr. Ortiz said really struck with me. The IMGs have so much grit, and I ended up reviewing a lot of applications for IMGs for our program, and I'll tell you, they are the most challenging to read. When I read their personal statements, I mean, I kid you not, there's some that have almost brought me to tears because of what you've had to go through to get to this point. And I think it's just amazing. So, I don't even think you have to embellish anything. You just tell your story and we will, and we will see that. And I think it counts for a lot. The only other thing I'll add is that, at least for our program, we like to see you've had some US experience, whether it's a rotation, just so that you've had experience sort of working in this environment over here. I know that was challenging during the peak COVID times. Hopefully that's gotten a little bit easier. And I think if you have that in your application, that also helps in making you stand out.
So if no one has anything to add, I have a follow-up question regarding that Dr. Butt mentioned about a year of graduation, and I believe we have a few questions on that. A lot of IMGs take non-traditional paths. A lot of them are reapplicants. Some of them do internship and then reapply. In that situation, does the year of graduation matter? Or if it does, what can one do to try and make up for the shortcoming?
I think what we try to look at is that you are in touch with some sort of clinical medicine. If you're completely, not in touch since you graduated from medical school and you are, totally doing biostats and research and, publishing papers, we understand you're working very hard. But, we also need to ensure that you become a good radiologist and you take care of the patients. So, and this has probably come with experience also, a little bit. So as long as you're in touch with some sort of clinical medicine, I think that definitely helps.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Bath, for that. As an IMG myself, I feel the last question was actually about me, and I really love the responses, and it's quite encouraging. So thank you very much for the response. So the next question is about applying to both DR and IR. So the question is, how should those that want to apply to both DR and IR navigate the application, assuming they want to apply to same program? And can same letter of recommendation be used for both applications? Thank you.
I think you can use the same letter of recommendation as far as IR and DR. We usually have common interviews for people. If somebody is invited both for DR and IR, we don't have separate interviews for them. So, but the team is more diverse. The interview team comprises of both DR and IR people. So, but that's just my program. But from what I think a single letter should be sufficient. It shouldn't be very specific towards interventional or diagnostic radiology, because we do understand IR is much more competitive and not everybody makes it, even though everybody wants to do it. And so a large number of those people land up matching in DR.
It's very tough, since IR has, have our own residency pathway to IR. It sort of changed things over the last couple of years. And I think every program sort of does it differently. We have our interview dates for the diagnostic radiology program. We have interview dates for the IR program. If there's someone who's dual applying, we make sure that we just, we give them, say, an interview in the IR slot, and we'll make sure we have one of the diagnostic radiologists as part of that panel, so that at least they get one interview from DR. And so at least there's some input from the diagnostic radiology perspective. I think having one letter as well is fine. If you're able to get, a letter from DR, one letter from IR, that helps as well. But it's tough. You love radiology, and that itself is tough to find for many students, because they may not be exposed to it as much in med school. And then you have to make this decision at the end of med school, whether it's DR or IR. So I think most programs will understand if you're sort of passionate about both and you want to apply to both, I think most people will end up finding the program that fits them. And I find there's a lot of applicants who may like the IR program at one program and rank them, and then the DR program at another place and then rank them, and they all end up okay in the end.
We have an ESIR program at our place, and some years we'll have 1 or 2 people, some years we'll have 1 person, some years we'll have no persons, but we interview everybody collectively and don't distinguish.
Yeah, I think also it's not uncommon to see when you're looking at the letters, somebody who maybe is quite clear actually that they want to go into DR, but they have a letter from somebody who is in IR because they did a rotation with them and they did a great job. So they're asking that person to speak on their behalf. So we try not to assume anything by who's writing or how that's worded specifically within radiology itself.
Peter, we can't hear you.
Sorry about that. The next question is regarding if an application decided on radiology later on during medical school, end of 3rd year and 4th year, and they've already had research in an unrelated specialty. How does an applicant like that proceed?
Not a deal breaker. It's not a deal breaker. I'll give you my example. I didn't realize that I wanted to go into radiology until August of my 4th year. So literally a month before EROS opened, right? I was gung-ho trying to do cardiothoracic surgery. I did radiology very late, literally in August as a rotation because I thought it was easy and I thought it would be like a cush rotation. And then I fell in love with it, right? And the rest is history from me. So it's not a deal breaker. And I had no research in radiology. In fact, I wasn't ever a researcher to begin with. I had like 1 paper, I think, that I published in med school, and it was definitely not in radiology. So the key is just to show your interest and be authentic about it, right? I think, that's the bottom line, and make sure that the people who are writing about you know your authenticity and show that authenticity and do whatever you can to express your interest and make programs aware of it. So it's definitely not a deal breaker. You can get involved late and it's not necessarily going to hurt you.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think you'd be surprised. Many people, if you look at your applications, I don't know percentage wise, but we have so many applicants, perhaps from the US schools that decide late, and as long as it's addressed in their application, no problem at all. And say, I was interested in this, and then I changed my mind because of this, and it definitely doesn't count as a red flag at all. So feel free to make that change as late as you can possibly make it. We will accept you with open arms. It's the best specialty. You all know that already. So we're happy if you find it even later on in your med school career.
Okay. Thank you very much, our panelists. Another question is on the step 3 exams. So wanted to know if having a step 3 exam gives a candidate an added advantage, or maybe aside from having a US clinical experience, maybe the research, does any other qualification also make a candidate to stand out, the step 3 and maybe any other qualification, like an MPH, MBA? Thank you.
I can share some thoughts and maybe flight of ideas. I apologize, but I'm not, I don't recall looking at step 3 that often when we look at applications. It's a number there. So a lot of, I think the US grads won't have step 3s at the time of application. The IMGs do, and the IMGs are also good that they all have great scores on step 3. So I don't even feel like it's something that I look at personally. Certainly, I suppose if you didn't pass or something like that, that'd be a red flag, right? But beyond that, I don't look at it. You'd also asked about other qualifications like MD, MBA. Yeah, again, I think it's great if you have those extra degrees. I think what I would look for in that is what have you done with that? So if you have an MBA, sort of how does that reflect who you are? What have you done with the MBA? What projects have you done? What have you done with the MPH? I think that would, interest me more than just the degree itself.
Yeah, I agree. The kind of why behind, are you getting the degree, what you've done with it, and whether it's a degree or some other type of experience. Some people, for example, had a whole other work history before going to medical school. So say you were an engineer for several years. Talk a little bit about that so we can better understand you. So it's not just like another line on the application. Because those types of things, if it all makes sense and is coherent, that can really help paint the picture of who you are as a person. So don't be afraid to kind of bring out those other experiences and then tie it into how that's going to help you be a better radiologist, how that's going to help you contribute to patient care in the field of radiology.
I think that's good to know. The next question is a very interesting question. There's a lot of anxiety and uncertainty or what really happens after we click submit. I was wondering if could share some light on that. How's the screening process, what goes into interviewing, and then finally adding the rank list?
I mean, I think every program probably does it differently, quite frankly. So what I'm about to tell you probably will have no relevance to Vanderbilt, no relevance to Yale or Mayo Clinic or any of the other programs that are talking. But, with that said, usually the PDs will look at the applications. They may divide them amongst, the PDs, and they'll read them. We read everything. Like, believe it or not, we're not just, looking at scores and saying, oh, he got a 220 or she got 20. We're not going to read the rest. No, we actually read the letters. We read the personal statements. Everything counts, really. I mean, I don't know how else to say it, but everything really does count. And, we'll select a certain number of applicants that we want to interview, right away. And, obviously it's rolling, and sometimes we get over thousands of applicants, right? So we don't interview everyone at once. We'll pick maybe like 30 or 40 candidates and be like, okay, we're going to offer these people interviews now, and then see what happens. And we'll continue to review more and more as time goes on. So, we look at everything to make interview decisions. It's not just a score. It's not just grades. It's not just personally. I mean, everything counts. So, but then, the interview is really a big deal. And I want to stress that. And I think that sometimes people, it's amazing how many med students I talk to who don't understand that. The interview, I think, is the most important thing that determines your rank, that determines whether you're 2 or 222 if people are interviewing 200. Well, that's probably not possible, or 120, right? So that's how big of a deal an interview is, because, really, like, if you get an interview, to me, you're good enough to match into our program, because we think that, okay, you've met the criteria that we think is, good, that you're going to be able to come here, you'll be able to succeed. But now we want to see, okay, well, can I connect with you? Will you be a good fit at my institution? Will you be part of our family? And we get that by interacting with you, even though it's only like 15 or 20 minutes with 3 or 4 different people, but that we learn a lot about you. Believe me, we learn a ton about you in that time. You will learn a lot about us. And I think that the interview is an extremely important part of the process, that specifically when it comes to the rank.
Yeah, I mean,
Go ahead.
I'm so sorry, Dr. Ortiz, why don't you go ahead?
No, you go ahead first. Go ahead.
Yeah, I said, it's a very thorough process. It's an imperfect process. I apologize, but it's as thorough as we can possibly do it. We have a big selection committee. We try to include people who are senior, who are junior, who are of different backgrounds. We realize that we need to sort of have that input into selecting the people that we'd want to interview. We have each application that's looked at by multiple people. We look at multiple metrics, at least 9 or 10 metrics, many of which have been talked about. and we try to decide amongst that, who's going to be a good fit for the program. We send out our interview offers and cycles, and then the interview is very important, and I'm certainly happy to talk about that when I'm sure there'll be questions on the interview process itself.
Yeah, I agree. We get swamped with so many applications, but we do go over every single one. We think that's fair. If somebody put the time and energy, put that together, get all those letters, we got to look through it. And we got to give everybody a fair shot and try to see if we can interview as many people as possible. Last year, for example, we had approximately 800 applications to our program. We have 5 slots. We interviewed about 120 from that, and and the interview process is even more intense because each person then becomes kind of like your personal advocate as your interviewer. I'm advocating for the people I interview, and I'm trying to get them up in the committee. I have one vote just like everybody else. We do it equally, democratically, and that's how it works. But yes, we look at all the applications, but they have to be timely, they have to be completed properly, and everything has to fit and make sense. Otherwise, it's going to be a no-go out the gate.
Thank you very much for that response to the question. So far, I'm sure that the attendees are really having a wonderful time, and really appreciate all the input so far. So about the interviews, that's actually an aspect that we've received a lot of questions from, and we just want to ask, how will a candidate prepare for an interview after being invited by the program? And is there a place of maybe networking prior to interviews or after interviews, or just how generally can one be well prepared to face the panel for the interviews?
Well, that's easy. Number one, I do agree. The interview is the equalizer, right? Just like that new movie with Denzel Washington. It really carries a lot of weight, and interview preparation is key. It's your opportunity to shine with confidence. You're the expert on yourself, and you got to be confident, not too cocky, but confident, polite, courteous, with a smile. It's always helpful because we all like to work with happy people, right? Learn about the program you're applying to. You have the internet at your disposal. You have friends who are other places. Be able to discuss your interests relative to that program. Make sure you check their website, look at their social media, their Twitter channel, or whatever they're doing. Be sincere, be honest. That's been said early on by one of our other panelists. I agree wholeheartedly. Be timely, and really, I think once you do all of those things, you'll be in a much better stead. And you can practice interviewing with friends. Practice talking about yourself. It's hard, right? But do practice.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
I agree. The more practice you get, the more that will help, especially if it's in a virtual setting. And if you're not comfortable with that, that usually kind of comes out right away. And now on the program side, we've done virtual interviews a few times, and it's something that for us seems very routine. But if you've not been in that spot, it can be fairly uncomfortable, where you have to teach yourself, where to look, how to know when to pause, which isn't always easy. And also not just how to look engaged in like the one-on-one type interviews, but if there's a larger group format, it can actually show up if people have some specific interest in the program by the engagement during those larger group sessions too. So don't just write off those larger group sessions as well. There is a lot of information out there on the internet. There have been papers that have been written about that, about how to prepare for virtual interviews or interviews just in general too. This is something that can be important later on, as far as standardized questions, behavioral type interview and questions that you might be asked. So you can actually find some of those questions just in general, not even just that are asked in radiology, but just in general that are asked in job interviews. And that will help you out, because if you take the time for the introspection ahead of time, you'll be that much more prepared during the actual interview itself.
And I would be somewhat prepared to ask a question also. A lot of the interviewers at the end are going to say, do you have any questions? Don't just say, no, I think we covered everything, or no, I heard about everything in the open house. Like, have an actual legitimate question about the program, something that you read on the website, something that lets us know that you are truly interested in coming here.
I would
Okay,
add just one more thing. Okay, I would add just one more thing. Presentation is really important. So please do not slouch in the chair while talking. But trust me, you would think that I'm joking, but I've had applicants who did that. So obviously that's a big no-no. So yes, dress up well. You know, the camera should be good, the lighting should be good. But if you don't have it, it's all right. You know, don't focus so much on the background, whether the painting is good or not. I mean, it makes a good conversation topic, but that's not everything. But yeah, I mean, your presentation is important. You know, don't just, you know, sit on a couch and show that you're not interested and you're doing us a favor.
Okay, thank you very much. Just a follow-up question. Is it important for maybe a candidate that's interviewed in a certain program to possibly come around, maybe after the interview, maybe to meet with the residents or maybe the other doctors in the program? Is it really important after an interview? Or
Yeah, you know, it's a challenging question. We sort of face that a little bit, and I'll say it's challenging because, you know, our graduate medical education office is not officially having us do in-person second looks, and the reason being that well, we could, I suppose, have it, but it should not affect the way we rank our applicants, because if we if somebody comes in for a second look, to me, they may be more interested in the program. Maybe I rank them a little bit higher. Somebody else would have wanted to come for a second look, but maybe they didn't have the means to come to New Haven, Connecticut for that second look. So I think that, you know, we don't, at least the policy as of now is to not offer our second looks, or certainly not to any, you know, offer second looks once our rank lists are certified. Listen, I think if an applicant wants to come and visit a program, you know, on their own accord and do that, I think that's perfectly fine and can show their interest. But it certainly is not something that our program will officially do, you know, for the reasons that I've stated.
Yeah, same for my clinic too. We do offer a no stakes visit, which we started last year. And which will be continuing this year as well. So basically what that means is we are required to submit our rank list prior to that, so that, you know, it doesn't affect us, or it doesn't bias us as to, you know, that, oh, you know, these candidates came and saw us, so yes, they are definitely interested and they should be moved up on the rank list. So, you know, as Dr. Mathur said, you know, not everybody can come, not everybody can make it. And we totally understand that. So, but if you're interested, it's for your decision making, not for ours. So, but otherwise, besides that no stakes visit, we do not allow for any other in-person second looks. So that's the school's policy.
Yeah, I agree to those points, and also I think also coming to a place to be present. Sometimes some people get a little too energetic and too enthusiastic, and it kind of backfires. So be careful with that. I would say though that it's if you're interested in an area and you're close by, you can get to walk around the pavement of a university, of the neighborhood. That might be helpful.
That's good advice. The next question I have is somewhat relevant to that. What are your thoughts on post-interview communication?
Yeah, you know, I'll just speak for myself because I think each of our people in our who do interviews sort of do it a little bit differently. You can send anything you want. I will take note of it. I promise you, I read every single one, but I do not reply. Some people do reply, and I think it's fine. I think it's a choice that we make, and it's not because I don't have the time, nor do because I'm rude. It's only because when I was a medical student applying, listen, I didn't get many interviews, and anytime I got any correspondence from a program, I would get tachycardic. I would be so excited. I would get my hopes up, and then nothing would happen. And so I don't want anyone else to feel the way I did when I was applying. And so I don't know whether the solution is to not respond at all. Maybe that's not the right approach, but that's just the approach I take. Some programs I think will tell you up front, listen, please don't send us anything, or they'll say, we have a very generic reply that we have. But I think it's sort of specific to each person interviewing. That being said, I promise you I read every single one that comes to my email, or back in the day, people used to write cards as well, send it to me as well. So I would read those as well.
I think it's helpful I agree with everything that, Mahan said. I think it's helpful, obviously, a thank you note, that's fine. I mean, I read everything. I try to respond to everyone, honestly, like even if it's like a line, I'll say thank you so much or whatever, but I think from your standpoint, from an applicant standpoint, I think it's helpful to tell your number one that they're your number one. And I think, just because it can elevate you. And I've seen it elevate people in rank order lists, in the years that I've been doing this. I think, if a program really knows that you're that, and when I say you're number one, I mean like you're only telling one program that you're their number one, and you're genuine, you're authentic about it. They can really elevate you, and it can sometimes make the difference in you matching it. It's not a guaranteed, obviously, and it certainly won't always work. But I think if you're sincere about it and you communicate that effectively and your reason in a very clear and concise way without being overbearing and not expecting a response back, I think it's a nice thing to do. And, you leave the ball on the program's court and see what happens.
Yeah, I've talked to a number of program directors about this, and basically response is extremely variable. So try not to, it's hard because it's human nature, but try not to read too much into whether somebody responds or somebody doesn't respond, or what the response was. We do read these messages, but people have different ways of handling it. So I wouldn't put meaning on the different ways of handling it.
I agree. I also think that a little gratitude goes a long way. I think it should be personalized, though. It shouldn't be the same exact email to everyone who interviewed you, because that stands out. I read each one. I do respond to each one. I'm old school. I love a handwritten letter, but I see maybe one of those now. I think out of all, if we interviewed 120 people, about a third sent thank yous via email, roughly. And there were some surveys done with some program directors and folks, and about 2/3 of the folks felt that the thank yous were helpful. But the responses will be very generic and graded because we're trying to keep the playing field as fair as possible.
Well, thank you for answering. So respecting the time of the speakers, so this is going to be the last question for this session. So obviously we are jumping into the future here, but are there any specific things we should be thinking about when we form our ranking list, apart from the geographical preferences we have?
Well, you should make your rank order list based on your preferences and not think about what programs think, if that makes sense. And I think that's a common mistake that a lot of applicants make. They think, oh, well, I think I did awesome at Vanderbilt. I'm going to rank them number one because I'll have a best chance of matching. Please don't do that. Please rank the program that you feel that you meshed with the best, because ultimately the algorithm favors your rank, as I'm told. I mean, I'm not part of the algorithm, but I've been told that the algorithm favors your rank list, not our rank list. So please make it according to how you would want to see yourself at a program, based on everything that you've seen, based on the culture, the environment, where you feel like you'll succeed, where you feel like you'll be at home to you, where you feel like you'll have a great conducive environment to learn, and anything else that you value. Whatever your values are, that's how you should make that list.
Yeah, go with your gut as well. You know, your gut has sort of led you so far in your career to this point. I'll say that I went entirely with my gut. I did my residency at Yale. I had a wonderful time at pre-interview dinner, met some wonderful people who I really got along with, and that's all I had to go by. I mean, there were great places, great people at other programs, but for whatever reason, that night, I just meshed with those people. I ranked it accordingly, matched there, have never looked back. And so there may be metrics, as Dr. Owen was saying, that push you to say, oh, I should go to this program or this program. But that sort of vibe you get, it's not easy to always get that vibe, but whatever vibe you're getting from a program, you know, make that a factor in how you decide to rank your programs.
Yeah, I always encourage applicants to talk to the residents in the post-interview, happy hours or whatever we have, because that gives you a huge idea of, what the city is like, if you have a family, is it, does it have a good school? I mean, obviously you have to spend 4 years or 5 years in that one place. So, that matters too. So, do your research, do everything. And, it's a very unique matching algorithm that NRMP uses, which none of us have the secret to. We don't know exactly what happens, but I think, as Dr. Awan said, your preference is, your ranking is given preference. So yes, do it very, put your heart and soul in it, and, do a lot of thinking, meditate before doing it, and then press the submit button.
All right. As a follow-up question, which is a bit interesting, how do we pick up the hints from the program that the program is also interested in us? Are there any specific hints we should look for?
I don't think that there'll be specific hints per se. There should be a sense in yourself on how the interaction is going with the program, with the people in the program, with the residents, with your interviewers, how the responses have been. You should have a gestalt, a reaction to it. Mahan's comment before, where he was talking to the residents and he felt engaged. You should have this feeling of community that, hey, that could work for me. I could be there, and if they're being positive with you, then that's telling you a lot. Those are the kind of signals you want to see. You want to see that you're asking questions, they're asking you questions, they're interested in your story, they're interested in your background. All of these things should give you an intuitive feel more so than a hint. Okay.
I mean, I'll tell you, I think I like every single one of the people we interview. So the fact that we interview you, that's the biggest hint that we like you. There is nothing else you need to know about that. After that, knock it out of the park with your interview and you'll be fine. I promise you.
Well, thank you for answering that. I sincerely thank all the respected speakers for joining us this evening, and I'm sure your help means everything to the applicants. We will wrap up this session, and thanks again to all the panelists and the moderators for making this session fruitful for the applicants. Thank you so much.
Thank you all the radiology leaders for joining the session. I'm really grateful, people joining from East Coast, where I can see it's already dark there. And then, and then yet these beautiful smiles and, these pearls of wisdom for the radiology applicants. So really, really appreciate that. And I know some of you are in travel and still joined this. So I really appreciate that. And also people from Africa, and where it's middle of the night. including Adike, who's in Nigeria right now, moderating the session. So I really appreciate the pearls of wisdom and you taking out time and giving this important message to the applicants this year, and also our moderators who did such a good job moderating this session. Thank you so much. And for all those who attended, we wish you all the luck for this application season. The questions were excellent, and I think you got some really good advice here. If there are some more questions, you can post them on social media. And there are also some really good, radiology residency panel sessions coming up, which will be posted on social media. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining today. Have a good night. Take care.